I am 19 years old, a female, and I thought my bedroom was the only place in the world where I could be completely alone. It was my sanctuary, a small rectangle of space carved out of a house that never quite felt like my own. My real dad left when I was a kid, and my mom met Mark about 5 years ago. He moved in, and then they got married, and suddenly the house was his house. He had opinions on everything, from the brand of ketchup in the fridge to the volume of the television. He was a man who liked order, who liked control, and he called it being a good provider. He called it keeping us safe. My mom, she bought into it completely. She saw him as a savior, someone who had stepped in to give us a stable life. "He cares so much, Chloe," she would say, her eyes shining with an earnestness that made it impossible to argue. "You should be grateful. Not every man would take on another man's child and treat her like his own." But he didn't treat me like his own. He treated me like a problem to be managed, a variable to be controlled. His version of caring felt like being held in a vise. It was a constant, low-grade pressure that I had just learned to live with. I spent my first year of college living in a dorm, and the freedom was intoxicating. I could breathe. I could leave my socks on the floor without a passive-aggressive comment being made the next morning. But college was expensive, and dorms were even more so. To save up for my sophomore year, I made the decision to move back home for the summer. I told myself it was only for 3 months. I could handle 3 months of Mark's suffocating presence in exchange for not having to take out another student loan. I thought I knew what I was signing up for. I was wrong. The first few weeks were manageable. I got a job at a local coffee shop, and I tried to be out of the house as much as possible. But Mark's behavior had gotten worse since I had been away. It was more intense, more focused. He wanted to know exactly where I was going, who I was going with, and precisely when I would be back. "Just so I know," he'd say, holding up his hands in a gesture of innocence. "It's a dangerous world out there. I worry." My mom would nod along, patting his arm. "He's right, honey. Just text him." So I did. I sent texts with my location. I sent texts with my friends' names. I sent texts when I was 5 minutes away from home. It felt demeaning, like I was a teenager again, but it was easier than fighting. It was the price of admission for living under his roof. I kept my head down and counted the days until I could leave for school again. The peace was fragile, and I was determined to keep it. The first real crack in my carefully constructed tolerance appeared on a Tuesday night. I was in my room, on the phone with my best friend, Sarah. We were talking about her disastrous date from the night before, and I was laughing so hard I had tears streaming down my face. It was a private conversation, the kind you can only have with someone you've known forever. We talked for over an hour, just unwinding and being silly. My bedroom door was closed. The television was on downstairs. There was no reason anyone should have been able to hear me. The next morning, I was getting a bowl of cereal in the kitchen. Mark walked in, pouring himself a cup of coffee. He leaned against the counter and looked at me with a strange little smile. "Sounds like Sarah had a rough night," he said casually. I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I tried to keep my voice even. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that always set my teeth on edge. "I just heard you laughing up a storm last night," he said. "Your door was closed, but you've got a powerful set of lungs. Must have been quite the story." I stared at him, my mind racing. My room was at the end of the hall upstairs. His room, my mom's room, was at the opposite end. There was no way he could have overheard the details of my conversation so clearly. It wasn't possible. I felt a prickle of fear on the back of my neck. I guess I was being loud, I mumbled, looking down at my cereal. I didn't want to challenge him. I didn't want to start a fight that I knew my mom would somehow end up taking his side on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. He wasn't just guessing. He knew. "You should tell Sarah to be more careful with those dating apps," he continued, sipping his coffee. "Lots of weirdos out there." He said it with the air of someone giving fatherly advice, but his eyes were sharp, watchful. He was enjoying this. He was letting me know that he knew, that my private conversations weren't really private at all. That was the moment the unease I always felt around him curdled into real dread. He had crossed a line. My room was supposed to be mine. It was the one place he couldn't follow me. But he had found a way in. I just didn't know how yet. I finished my breakfast in silence, the cereal tasting like cardboard in my mouth. I knew then that I couldn't just ignore this. I had to find out what was going on. My summer of quiet compliance was officially over. The feeling of being watched didn't go away. It grew stronger. Every time I was in my room, I felt a strange sense of exposure, as if there were invisible eyes on me. I started changing my clothes in the closet. I would scan the walls and the ceiling, looking for something, anything out of place. But everything looked normal. It was just a regular bedroom. A bed, a desk, a bookshelf, a closet. There was nothing to suggest my privacy was being violated, except for Mark's knowing smirks and my own gnawing paranoia. He kept making little comments, dropping tiny bits of information that he had no business knowing. He mentioned the book I was reading, a novel I kept on my nightstand. Looks like a sad one. He'd commented as I walked past him in the hallway. Hope it has a happy ending. He brought up a new poster I had put on my wall, one I had ordered online and tacked up just the day before. Interesting choice in art, he'd said, a little dark for my taste. Each comment was a small jab, a reminder that he was there, that he saw everything. My mom remained blissfully unaware. She saw his comments as him taking an interest in my life. "It's so nice that he pays attention to you, Chloe," she said one afternoon. "He really is trying to connect." I just nodded, a sick feeling churning in my gut. He was connecting, but it wasn't in the way she thought. The breaking point, the moment that turned my fear into cold, hard certainty, came on a Saturday. I had decided to do a deep clean of my room, partly to distract myself and partly out of a desperate need to reclaim the space, to make it feel like mine again. I was listening to music on my headphones, dusting the tall bookshelf against the far wall. I reached for a thick textbook on the top shelf, one I hadn't touched since my freshman year of high school. My fingers fumbled and the heavy book slipped, tumbling down. It crashed onto a small white plastic disc mounted on the ceiling in the corner of the room. It was a smoke detector. Mark had installed it about a month ago. He had made a big deal about it, going on and on about fire safety. He insisted on putting it up himself, saying the old one was outdated. I had thought nothing of it at the time. The book hit the detector with a loud crack. The plastic cover, the part that you twist off to change the batteries, popped open from the impact and dangled by a thin piece of plastic. I sighed, annoyed, and dragged my desk chair over to fix it. I climbed up, expecting to see a 9-volt battery and some simple wiring. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. There was a battery, yes, but there was also a small green circuit board next to it. Embedded in the center of the board was a tiny black dot that glinted in the light from my window. It was a lens, a camera lens, and next to it, tucked into a small slot, was a micro SD card. I stared at it, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I couldn't breathe. My mind flashed back through every moment of unease. Every strange comment, every feeling of being watched. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. He had put a camera in my smoke detector. He was watching me. I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the top of the bookshelf to steady myself. He had been watching me for a month, watching me sleep, watching me get dressed, watching me have private phone calls. The violation was so profound, so absolute, that I felt like I was going to be sick right there on the chair. My hands were shaking, but a different feeling was starting to push through the shock and disgust. It was anger, a pure, white-hot rage that burned away the fear. He had done this to me, in my own room, in my own home. My gaze drifted around the room, now seeing it through new, horrified eyes. Where else? If he put one here, there had to be others. My eyes landed on the digital clock on my nightstand. It was a new one, a birthday gift from him and my mom a few months ago. I had thought it was a strange gift, a little impersonal, but I hadn't questioned it. I scrambled off the chair and snatched the clock. It felt slightly heavier than it should. I turned it over and over in my hands, my fingers searching for anything unusual. And then I saw it. A tiny pinhole on the side, almost perfectly hidden in the black plastic casing. I tilted it towards the light, my heart sinking even further. I could see the unmistakable glint of another lens. There were two of them. At least two. He had me covered from two different angles. The smoke detector gave him a wide, overhead view of the whole room. The clock on my nightstand gave him a close-up view of my bed. The thought was so vile, so repulsive that I had to sit down on the floor. I hugged my knees to my chest, trying to control my breathing. He hadn't just crossed a line. He had obliterated it. This wasn't protection. This wasn't him caring. This was something dark and twisted. And I was living in the same house with the person who was doing it. I knew I couldn't confront him. Not yet. He would deny it. He would call me crazy. He would turn my mom against me and I would have nowhere to go. No, I couldn't just get angry. I had to get smart. I had to get proof. Proof that no one, not even my mom, could deny. I looked up at the dangling smoke detector and then at the clock in my hand. He thought he had all the power. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I stayed on the floor for what felt like an hour, just trying to process the magnitude of the violation. My mind was a whirlwind of disgust, fear, and a growing, icy resolve. I couldn't panic. Panicking was what he would expect. It would make me sloppy. I had to think. I had to be strategic. My first instinct was to rip the cameras out of the wall and smash them into a million pieces, but that wouldn't solve the problem. It would only alert him that I knew. He would just find a new, more clever way to watch me. And he would use my discovery as proof that I was paranoid and unstable. See? I could almost hear him saying to my mom, "I told you she was having a hard time. Now she's destroying the house." No, I had to be smarter than him. I needed evidence. Hard, undeniable evidence that would leave him with no room to lie, no corner to hide in. I looked at the smoke detector, the battery cover still hanging open. The micro SD card was sitting right there, a tiny black square of potential truth. I needed to see what was on it. I carefully climbed back onto the chair, my hands surprisingly steady now. The rage had focused me. I used my fingernail to gently push the SD card. It clicked and popped out. I held it in the palm of my hand. It was so small, yet it held the key to everything. I didn't have a micro SD card reader on my laptop. I needed help. There was only one person I could trust. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with the screen. I found Sarah's name and pressed call. I didn't want to talk inside the house, not even in my room. The clock camera was still active, and for all I knew, it had audio. I slipped out of my room, closing the door softly behind me, and went down the back stairs and out into the yard. I huddled behind a large lilac bush, making sure I was out of sight of any of the house's windows. "Hello?" Sarah's cheerful voice answered on the second ring. My own voice came out as a choked whisper. "Sarah? It's me." Her tone changed immediately. "Chloe? What's wrong?" "You sound awful." I took a shaky breath. "I can't talk now. Not really, but I need your help. It's serious." I could hear the concern in her voice. "Of course. What do you need? Are you okay?" she asked. "I am. And I'm not," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Listen, can you come over? But don't come to the door. Park down the street. And can you bring your laptop? The one with the SD card slot?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "An SD card slot? Okay, this is weird. Are you in trouble?" she asked. "I don't know," I whispered honestly. "I think I'm in a lot of trouble. Just please, come quickly. And don't tell anyone you're coming to see me." I felt a pang of guilt for being so cryptic, for scaring her, but I couldn't risk saying anything more over the phone. I didn't know what else he might be listening to. "I'm on my way," she said, her voice firm. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and slid down to sit on the grass, my back against the rough bark of the tree. I clutched the tiny memory card in my hand. 15 minutes felt like an eternity. I thought about my mom. I thought about how she would react when she found out. Would she believe me? Or would her loyalty to Mark be so absolute that she would find a way to excuse this? The thought made me feel even more alone. This wasn't just about exposing Mark. It was about finding out if my own mother was on my side. I saw Sarah's car pull up at the end of the block. I waited until she got out and then quickly texted her to walk to the park at the end of our street. I met her by the swings, away from the main path. She rushed over, her face etched with worry. "Chloe, what on earth is going on? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, grabbing my arm. I didn't say anything. I just opened my hand and showed her the micro SD card. She frowned. "What is this?" she asked. I finally found my voice. "It was in a smoke detector in my bedroom," I said. A smoke detector with a camera in it. Sarah's eyes went wide. She stared at me, then back at the card, then back at me. "Wait, what? A camera? Who put it there?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Mark," I said, the name tasting like poison. "He installed it a month ago. Sarah, he's been watching me." The full horror of the situation seemed to dawn on her at once. She looked horrified, then furious. "That monster," she breathed. "That absolute creep. We have to see what's on this. Right now." She pulled her laptop out of her bag, and we found a secluded bench hidden by a cluster of trees. My heart hammered in my chest as she slid the tiny card into the slot. This was it. This was the moment of truth. The laptop screen flickered as it recognized the new device. A folder appeared. It was labeled simply, "Footage." Sarah looked at me, her expression grim. "Are you sure you want to see this?" she asked gently. I nodded, my jaw tight. "I have to," I said. "I have to know." She took a deep breath and double-clicked the folder. It opened to reveal dozens, maybe hundreds of video files. Each one was named with a date and a timestamp. The oldest one was from over a month ago, the day I had moved home from college. My stomach lurched. He had started this the moment I was back under his roof. Sarah clicked on a random file from a few weeks back. The video player opened, and my own bedroom filled the screen. The angle was from high up in the corner, a bird's-eye view of my entire room. The quality was surprisingly clear. I saw myself at my desk, studying for an online summer course. I watched myself pace around the room while talking on the phone. I saw myself sleeping. The mundane reality of it somehow made it even more sickening. He had turned my life into his own private television show. We clicked on another file. This one was from the night before. I watched myself changing out of my work clothes and into my pajamas. I had been so oblivious, so completely unaware. I felt a hot flush of shame and rage. He had seen me. He had watched me at my most vulnerable. "Oh, Chloe," Sarah whispered, putting her arm around me. "I'm so sorry." I didn't cry. I was too angry to cry. "Keep looking," I said, my voice cold and hard. "I want to see everything." We scrolled through the files, a grim slideshow of my stolen privacy. We saw me laughing with Sarah on the phone. We saw me crying after a stupid argument with my mom about chores. We saw me reading in bed until late at night. Every private moment, every unguarded expression had been captured and stored. Then, Sarah stopped on a particular file. The date was from the day he had installed the smoke detector. "Look," she said, pointing at the screen. She played the video. It started with a close-up view of Mark's face. He was up on a ladder, his face just inches from the lens. He finished connecting the wires, then he looked directly into the camera. A small, smug smile spread across his face. It was a look of triumph, of secret satisfaction. He held the gaze for a moment longer, and then he pulled back, and the view shifted to the wide shot of my room as he snapped the cover into place. That smile, that one single expression confirmed everything I needed to know. This wasn't about safety. This was about power. It was about the thrill he got from his secret dominion over me. Seeing that smile lit a fire in me. I was done being a victim. I was going to use his own sick game to tear his world apart. We sat on that park bench for over an hour, a bubble of cold fury surrounding us in the warm afternoon sun. We kept digging through the files on the SD card, and with every video, the picture became clearer and more disturbing. It wasn't just that he was recording me. He was studying me. We found the footage from the night I'd been on the phone with Sarah, the conversation he had overheard. The audio was crystal clear. We could hear every word we'd said. He hadn't just overheard a few shouted words through a door. He had been listening intently, like an intelligence officer monitoring a target. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, shaking her head as she watched the video. "He's not just a creep, Chloe. He's methodical." That was the word for it. Methodical. There was a chilling purpose to his surveillance. As we continued to watch, we noticed something else. The cameras weren't just recording to the SD card. We found a file that showed him on his own laptop, setting up the camera's software. A menu on the screen clearly showed an option for Wi-Fi streaming. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed, pointing at the screen. "He's not just reviewing the footage later, he can watch this live. From his phone, from his computer, from anywhere." The thought made me feel physically ill. At any moment of any day, he could just decide to tune in and watch me. While he was at work. While he was sitting right downstairs in the living room, pretending to watch TV with my mom. The invasion was total. There was no escape. A new layer of the violation settled over me. This wasn't just about having a secret archive of my life. It was about the power of knowing he could look in on me whenever he wanted. It explained the uncanny timing of his comments, his almost psychic knowledge of what I was doing at any given moment. He was watching in real time. We kept digging, driven by a grim necessity. We had to understand the full scope of what he was doing. And that's when we found the most damning evidence of all. We found a video file from a few days ago. I was out of the house at work. The room was empty, but the audio was still recording. We heard the door to the living room open downstairs, and then we heard voices. It was Mark and my mom. They were talking about me. "I'm just worried about her, Janet," Mark said, his voice dripping with false concern. "She seems so withdrawn lately, and she was on the phone for hours last night, whispering. It just seems secretive." My mom's voice was full of anxiety. "I know, I've noticed it too. I try to talk to her, but she just shuts me out." Then came the part that made my blood boil. I heard her telling her friend Sarah that she thinks our rules are stupid. Mark continued, his voice a perfect imitation of a concerned stepfather. "She said she can't wait to leave and get away from us." It was a complete lie, a malicious twisting of my words. I had been complaining to Sarah about my summer job, not about my mom or the house rules. But he took that little piece of information he had stolen from me and weaponized it. He was actively turning my own mother against me, painting me as an ungrateful and rebellious daughter. "He's been using this to manipulate her," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it was going to consume me. All this time, I thought she was just naturally taking his side. But he's been feeding her lies. He's been isolating me on purpose. Sarah looked at me, her face pale. "This is so much worse than we thought," she said. "He's not just watching you. He's trying to control your entire life, your relationships, everything." That was the moment everything crystallized for me. My initial plan had been to just get enough proof to show my mom and the police. But now, that didn't feel like enough. Just exposing him felt too simple. He had systematically dismantled my sense of security, my privacy, and my relationship with my mother. He had made me feel small and powerless in my own home. I didn't just want him to be caught. I wanted him to be humiliated. I wanted him to feel a fraction of the violation and helplessness he had inflicted on me. I looked at Sarah, a new, dangerous idea forming in my mind. "I'm not going to the police," I said. "Not yet." Sarah frowned. "What?" "Chloe, this is a crime, a serious one. We have to report him." I shook my head. "We will," I promised. "But not yet. First, I'm going to make him pay. I'm going to use his own system against him. He wants to watch a show? I'm going to give him the performance of a lifetime." A slow smile spread across Sarah's face as she began to understand. "What are you thinking?" she asked, a glint of excitement in her eyes. "I'm thinking," I said, my voice low and steady, "that it's time to set a trap." We sat there in the park, the laptop open between us, and we started to scheme. The anger that had been a hot, chaotic fire inside me was now forged into a sharp, cold instrument. I was no longer a victim cowering in her room. I was a hunter, and Mark was my prey. The first step was crucial. I had to put the SD card back. If he checked the camera and found it missing, the whole plan would be ruined. He would know I was onto him. I also had to make sure the other camera, the one in the clock, was still operational. I didn't dare try to open it and check for a card. I had to assume it was also Wi-Fi enabled and that he was monitoring it. "Okay," I said, thinking out loud. "He's watching. He's listening. So everything I do in that room from now on has to be for his benefit." Sarah leaned in, her eyes alight with the thrill of conspiracy. "So we're writing a script," she said. "And you're the star." I nodded. "Exactly. And the plot is going to be something he absolutely cannot resist." We brainstormed ideas. What was Mark's weakness? What motivated him beyond his sick need for control? The answer was obvious. Money. He was obsessed with it. He was always complaining about bills, talking about investments he wished he could make, and making comments about how expensive it was to support me. His desire for control and his greed were two sides of the same coin. "That's it," I said, a plan clicking into place. "We'll create a story about money. A lot of money. Money that he thinks he can get his hands on." The plan was simple, but it had to be executed perfectly. I would pretend to receive a large, unexpected inheritance. It had to be believable. We invented a distant great aunt, someone my mom wouldn't know well, who had supposedly just passed away. We decided on a figure that would be life-changing but not so astronomical as to be unbelievable. $100,000. It was the perfect amount to make a man like Mark lose all sense of caution. "He'll hear this," Sarah said, pointing to the laptop. "He'll hear you talking about it, and he won't be able to help himself. He'll want a piece of it." I smiled. A real, genuine smile for the first time all day. "He won't just want a piece of it," I said. "He'll think he's entitled to it. He'll see it as his right, as the man of the house to manage it for me. And that's how we'll catch him." We spent another hour working out the details. I would have a loud, excited phone call with Sarah in my room. I would talk about the inheritance, the lawyer's call, the shock of it all. I would specifically mention that I didn't trust banks and that I wanted to keep the initial paperwork and maybe even a cashier's check somewhere safe in my room until I decided what to do. It was the perfect bait. After we had the plan ironed out, I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was still there. A low hum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a powerful sense of purpose. I was taking control. I was flipping the script. Before we left the park, I carefully wiped the SD card with the sleeve of my shirt to remove any fingerprints and slid it back into its small plastic case. Sarah drove me back to my street, and I slipped back into the house, my heart pounding once again. My mom and Mark were in the living room watching a movie. They didn't even look up as I walked past. I went upstairs to my room and closed the door. The air felt thick with his unseen presence. I looked at the smoke detector, then at the clock. Showtime. I whispered to the empty room and to the man I knew was watching. I took a deep breath, climbed onto the chair, and carefully slid the micro SD card back into its slot until it clicked. The trap was now set. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to spring it. The next evening was the perfect opportunity. My mom was at her weekly book club, which meant Mark was home alone. It was the ideal audience for my one-woman show. I waited until I heard him settle into his recliner in the living room, the familiar sound of a sports channel filling the downstairs. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and called Sarah. I put her on speakerphone, turning the volume up just enough to be clearly audible. "You are not going to believe what just happened," I said, my voice filled with a practiced, breathless excitement. "I'm freaking out right now." On the other end, Sarah played her part perfectly. "What is it? Did you get the job? Did that guy from the coffee shop finally ask you out?" she asked, her voice eager. No, it's bigger than that," I said, pacing back and forth in front of the digital clock on my nightstand, making sure I was in its direct line of sight. "So you know my great-aunt Mildred? The one who lived out in Oregon?" "My mom's aunt?" "Vaguely," Sarah said. "The one with all the cats?" "That's the one," I said, letting out a little laugh that sounded more like a gasp. "Well, she passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I just got a call from her lawyer, Sarah. She left me money. A lot of money." I let that hang in the air for a moment. I could almost feel Mark downstairs, his attention shifting from the game on TV to the conversation happening in my room. "A lot of money?" Sarah repeated, her voice rising in pitch. "Like, buy a new car money or buy a new house money?" "Like $100,000 money," I said, letting the number drop like a bomb. I made sure my voice was filled with disbelief and awe. I sat down on my bed, directly in the camera's view. I don't even know what to do. The lawyer said the initial papers and a cashier's check are being sent by courier. They should be here in a day or two. $100,000, Sarah shrieked convincingly. "Chloe, that's incredible. That's life-changing. Your college is paid for. You can get your own apartment. You never have to work at that coffee shop again." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair in a gesture of overwhelmed confusion. "But I'm also kind of terrified. What do I do with that much money? I don't trust banks. I've heard all these horror stories, and I definitely don't want to tell my mom and Mark about it yet. Not until I have a plan." This was the crucial part. I had to plant the seed of secrecy to make him think this was a treasure he alone knew about. "Mark would just want to control it," I continued, lowering my voice as if I were sharing a deep secret. "He'd say he needs to invest it for me, and I'd probably never see it again. I need to keep it safe. Somewhere here. In my room. The lawyer said the check is as good as cash." I imagined him downstairs, his greed and his ego flaring up. He would see this as his opportunity. He would think I was a foolish, naive girl who needed a smart man like him to handle her affairs. "You have to be so careful, Chloe," Sarah said, her voice full of fake concern. "A check for that amount. You can't just leave it lying around." "I know," I said, looking around my room as if I were searching for a hiding place. "I'll find somewhere good. Somewhere no one would ever think to look. Anyway, I have to go. I need to process all this. I'll call you as soon as the package arrives." We said our goodbyes and I ended the call. I sat on my bed for a few more minutes, pretending to be lost in thought. I wanted to give him a good show. Then I stood up, stretched, and went about my evening routine as if nothing had happened. The bait was in the water. Now I just had to see if he would bite. It didn't take long. The very next morning, Mark's behavior towards me had shifted dramatically. The usual gruff, dismissive attitude was gone. In its place was a syrupy, unsettling friendliness. He was waiting in the kitchen when I came down for breakfast, a wide, artificial smile plastered on his face. "Good morning, Chloe," he said, his voice oozing a warmth that was completely foreign. "I made some extra coffee. Would you like a cup? I blinked, feigning surprise. Oh, sure. Thanks, I said. He poured a cup and slid it across the counter to me. It felt like a business transaction. So, he began, leaning against the counter in what he probably thought was a casual pose. Anything exciting happened yesterday? His eyes were gleaming with a predatory curiosity. He was fishing, trying to see if I would volunteer the information. I knew I had to play dumb. Not really, I said with a shrug, sipping the coffee. Just the usual. Work was slow. He nodded, his smile not wavering. Right. It's just, you seemed to be in a very good mood when you got home. I thought maybe you'd gotten some good news. I forced a small, secretive smile. Oh, it was nothing. Just a funny phone call with Sarah. I was dangling the hook right in front of his face. I could see the frustration flicker in his eyes before he masked it with another layer of friendliness. Well, that's good, he said. It's nice to see you happy. The conversation was so stilted, so transparent that it was almost comical. He was a terrible actor. His greed was practically radiating off him in waves. Later that day, he, coincidentally, started a conversation about finances. He was talking to my mom, but his words were aimed at me. He spoke loudly about the stock market, about smart investments, about how important it was to have a good financial advisor. You just can't let a large sum of money sit around, he declared, looking directly at me. It's irresponsible. You have to make your money work for you. My mom nodded along, oblivious. You're so smart about these things, Mark, she said admiringly. I just kept my head down, pretending to be absorbed in a magazine, but inside I was celebrating. He had taken the bait. He was already planning how to spend my imaginary money. The trap was halfway sprung. Now it was time to prepare the second act. The next phase of the plan required more props. Sarah, my loyal co-conspirator, was a theater major, and she dove into her role with enthusiasm. She went to a craft store and bought some thick, official-looking parchment paper. She used a fancy font on her computer to type up a fake legal letter from the law offices of Smith and Harding, detailing the inheritance from my great-aunt Mildred. It looked incredibly convincing. She even created a fake cashier's check on her design software, printing it on special paper to give it a realistic feel and look. The payee was my name, and the amount was exactly $100,000. That evening, it was time for another performance. I waited until both Mark and my mom were home. I had a small, empty courier box that I had saved from a previous online order. I walked in the front door holding it, a look of nervous excitement on my face. My package came, I announced to the room at large before quickly heading up the stairs. I knew Mark's eyes were following me. I went into my room and closed the door. I waited about 10 minutes, then called Sarah again, my voice a conspiratorial whisper. It's here, I whispered into the phone. The papers, the check, everything. It's real, Sarah. I'm holding a check for $100,000. I made rustling noises with the parchment paper near the phone for effect. I'm so scared. I don't know where to put it. This feels like too much responsibility. Sarah's voice was a steady whisper back. Okay, don't panic. You need a really good hiding place. Somewhere he would never look. I looked towards my closet, directly in the line of sight of the smoke detector camera. I know, I said. I have this old shoebox. It's in the back of my closet, under a pile of old winter sweaters. No one ever goes in there. I'll put it in there. It's the last place anyone would think to look for something so valuable. I described the exact location, painting a clear map for him. It's a red Nike box, I added, for good measure. Okay, good, Sarah whispered back. That sounds safe. Just put it there for now, and we can figure out a plan to get it to a real bank later this week. Don't tell anyone, Chloe. Not a soul. I won't, I promised. My lips are sealed. After I hung up, the real work began. I took an old red Nike shoebox from my closet. I placed Sarah's beautifully forged documents and the fake cashier's check inside. But I added 2 more items. The The first was a tiny, inexpensive audio recorder I had bought at an electronics store. It was voice activated. I switched it on and buried it underneath the fake papers. The second item was my own counter surveillance. I took my old smartphone, which I no longer used, and propped it up behind a pile of clothes on my closet shelf. I positioned it so the camera had a perfect, clear view of the spot where I was about to place the shoebox. I started a video recording and made sure the screen was dark. It would record for hours. I placed the doctored shoebox exactly where I had described it on the phone. At the very back of the closet, underneath a stack of old sweaters. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. His cameras, and now, my camera. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. I had laid the perfect trap using his own methods against him. Now all I had to do was give him the opportunity to walk right into it. The final phase of the plan required me to be out of the house, giving Mark the time and privacy he would need to make his move. The next day, a Saturday, was perfect. In the morning, I made a point of announcing my plans loudly at the breakfast table. "Sarah and I are going to the beach for the day," I said cheerfully. "I probably won't be back until late tonight. We're going to grab dinner out there, too." My mom smiled. "Oh, that sounds lovely, honey. Have fun." Mark looked up from his newspaper, his expression carefully neutral, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It was anticipation. "Drive safe," he said, his voice even. "Don't want anything to happen to you." The hidden meaning behind his words was chilling. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried about the safety of his potential payday. As I was getting ready to leave, I made one last show of it. I went into my room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I hummed to myself as I packed a beach bag, making sure to walk past the closet a few times. I wanted him to know I was leaving the treasure behind. I wanted him to be sure it was unguarded. Finally, I grabbed my bag, yelled a final, "Bye," and walked out the front door. But I didn't go to meet Sarah at the beach. Instead, I met her in her car, which was parked just around the corner, in a spot that had a clear view of my house's front door. Sarah had brought snacks and drinks. We were in for a long wait. "Do you think he'll do it?" she asked, her voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "I know he will," I said with a certainty that surprised even myself. "He can't help himself. His greed is bigger than his brain." We sat in the car, trying to act casual, but my eyes were glued to my house. The waiting was the hardest part. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. We talked in low voices, going over the plan again and again. What would we do when we had the footage? How would we confront him? I had my old smartphone connected to my current phone via a remote viewing app. I had set it up before leaving the house, a last-minute stroke of genius. It was a bit grainy, but it gave us a live feed from the camera I had hidden in my closet. For the first hour, the screen showed nothing but the dark interior of my closet. The shoebox sat there, still and waiting. We watched the minutes crawl by. A neighbor walked their dog. A mail truck came and went. The world outside continued as normal, while inside my house, a quiet domestic drama was about to unfold. Then it happened. About an hour and a half after I had left, the remote feed on my phone flickered. The light in the closet changed. The door had been opened. My heart leaped into my throat. Sarah grabbed my arm. "He's in there," she whispered, her eyes wide. We both leaned in closer to my phone screen. A figure moved into the frame. It was Mark. He was moving quickly, furtively. He glanced over his shoulder, back towards the bedroom door, even though he thought he was completely alone. He was nervous. Good. He knelt down, his back partially to my hidden camera, but we could see exactly what he was doing. He reached to the back of the closet, his arm burrowing under the pile of sweaters I had described. He pulled out the red Nike shoebox. He held it for a moment as if weighing it in his hands. Then he lifted the lid. We watched as he rummaged through the contents. He pushed aside the fake legal documents. His hand closed around the fake cashier's check. He pulled it out and looked at it. Even on the small, grainy screen, we could see the look of pure, unadulterated greed on his face. It was a look of triumph. Then, he did something that made my blood run even colder. He looked around the room again, then he spoke. He was muttering to himself, his voice too low for my phone's microphone to pick up clearly, but I knew the audio recorder in the box would be getting every single word. He folded the fake check and slipped it into his pocket. He put the lid back on the shoebox, shoved it back under the sweaters, and stood up. He smoothed down his shirt, took one last look around, and then walked out of the closet, pulling the door shut behind him. The screen went dark again. We had him. We had it all on video. We had him entering my room without permission. We had him searching through my private belongings. We had him stealing what he believed to be $100,000. And we had a separate audio recording of whatever he had said while doing it. Sarah and I sat in the car in stunned silence for a moment, the adrenaline coursing through us. Then she let out a low whistle. "Wow," she said. "He really did it. He walked right into it." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was a smile of pure, vindictive satisfaction. "Yes, he did," I said. "And he has no idea that he just destroyed his own life." The waiting was over. The trap had been sprung and the evidence secured. Now came the part I had been waiting for, the confrontation. I was no longer just going to expose him. I was going to enjoy it. We waited for a few more hours, just to be safe. I didn't want to return home too early and make him suspicious. Sarah and I went to a coffee shop far from my neighborhood and uploaded the video file from my old phone to the cloud. We also retrieved the footage from the park bench session, the video of him installing the camera and smiling that smug smile. We now had a complete, undeniable portfolio of his crimes. As evening approached, a cold sense of purpose settled over me. I knew what I had to do. Sarah dropped me off at the end of my street. "Are you sure you want to do this tonight?" she asked, her hand on my arm. "You don't have to face him alone." "I'm not facing him alone," I said, patting her hand. "I have all the proof I need. This is something I have to do myself." I walked home, my steps feeling lighter than they had all summer. The fear was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. I was no longer the scared girl hiding in her room. I was the one in control now. I walked in the front door to find my mom and Mark in the living room, watching television. It was a scene of perfect domestic tranquility, a complete and utter lie. "Hey, honey," my mom said, smiling at me. "Did you have a good time at the beach?" "It was great," I said, my voice calm and even. Mark glanced up at me, a quick, nervous flicker in his eyes before he looked back at the screen. He was trying to act normal, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought he was $100,000 richer. He had no idea the storm that was about to break over his head. I didn't go upstairs. I stood in the entryway to the living room, my phone in my hand. "Mom, Mark?" I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the television. "We need to talk." My mom looked up, her brow furrowing with concern at my serious tone. "What is it, Chloe? Is everything okay?" Mark muted the TV, his face a mask of feigned innocence. "What's wrong?" he asked. I looked directly at him. "I know what you've been doing, Mark," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" he asked, already starting to gaslight me, to frame me as the unstable one. My mom looked back and forth between us, her expression worried. "Chloe, honey, what's going on? You're scaring me." I ignored her for a moment, my eyes locked on Mark. I was going to enjoy peeling back his layers of deception one by one. "Let's start with the cameras," I said simply. Mark's face went white. It was a flash of panic so quick that if you weren't looking for it, you would have missed it. But I saw it. He recovered almost instantly, his expression hardening into one of indignation. "Cameras? What cameras? That's a crazy accusation. I would never do something like that." he sputtered, his voice a little too loud. He turned to my mom, playing the victim. Janet, can you believe this? After everything I do for her, this is the thanks I get. My mom looked at me, her eyes pleading. Chloe, that's a horrible thing to say about Mark. He would never invade your privacy like that. He's your stepfather. He loves you. The words stung, but I had expected them. Her denial was part of the wall I had to break through. I held up my phone. Then you won't mind if we watch a little home movie, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Before either of them could react, I used the screen mirroring function on my phone to connect to the smart TV. The crime show they had been watching vanished, replaced by the dark, grainy image of the inside of my closet. Mark froze. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly agape, the color draining from his face. My mom just looked confused. What is this? She asked. It's my closet, I said. Just watch. We all watched in silence as the video played. We saw the closet door open. We saw Mark step inside. My mom let out a small gasp. Mark, what are you doing in Chloe's closet? She asked, her voice trembling. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He was transfixed by the image of himself on the screen, caught in the act. We watched him pull out the shoebox. We watched him open it. We watched him take out the fake check. My mom's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. Is that a check? She whispered. I narrated for her. It's a fake cashier's check for $100,000, I explained calmly. From a fake inheritance I invented. I knew he was watching me, so I set a trap. The final, damning image was of Mark slipping the check into his own pocket. The video ended and the screen went black, plunging the room into a thick, suffocating silence. My mom slowly turned her head to look at Mark. Her face was a mask of utter betrayal and disgust. He was still staring at the blank TV screen, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked like a cornered animal. And there's more, I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I swiped on my phone and a new video filled the screen. It was the footage from the smoke detector, the day he installed it. It showed his face, close up, looking directly into the lens. And then that smug, triumphant smile. That was the moment my mother finally broke. You did this, she whispered, her voice shaking with a fury I had never heard from her before. You put cameras in my daughter's room. You spied on her. He finally tore his eyes away from the TV and looked at her, his face crumbling into a pathetic mask of desperation. Janet, please, he stammered. It's not what it looks like. I was worried about her. I wanted to make sure she was safe. Safe? My mom shrieked, her voice cracking. You call this safe? You watched her. You violated her. You violated me. You violated our home. He tried to stand up, to go to her, but she recoiled as if he were a snake. Don't you touch me, she hissed. He was unraveling, the confident, controlling man disappearing before my eyes, replaced by a whimpering, pathetic coward. But I wasn't finished with him yet. I had one more card to play. I took a deep breath. I have to admit, Mark, I said, my voice dripping with false admiration. It was a pretty good plan. You used the cameras to learn my secrets, then used those secrets to manipulate my mom and isolate me. And then, when you thought I had money, you decided to steal it. You even had a little speech prepared. He looked at me, confused. I pulled the small audio recorder out of my pocket. I put this in the shoebox, I explained. It's voice-activated. Let's hear what you had to say when you thought no one was listening. I pressed the play button. His own voice, tinny and distorted, filled the room. It was a muttered monologue, but every word was clear. This is for your own good, Chloe. His recorded voice said, You're too irresponsible to handle this kind of money. A young girl like you? You'd just waste it. It's better this way. I'll take care of it. It's my money now. I earned it putting up with her all these years. My mom let out a strangled sob. That was the final, brutal confirmation of his true nature. It wasn't about protection. It was about greed, resentment, and a deep-seated contempt for me. He saw me as a burden, and this money was his twisted form of payment. Mark just stood there, speechless, his face ashen. He had been so thoroughly, so completely exposed that there was nothing left for him to say. He had no lies left. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer, letting him stew in his own humiliation. Then I delivered the final blow. You know, at first I wasn't sure what to do, I said conversationally. I thought about just showing this to Mom, but then I realized that what you did isn't just a betrayal. It's a crime. I looked him dead in the eye. So I called the police this morning. I sent them copies of everything. The videos, the audio. They told me they had everything they needed. They also told me they were on their way. As if on cue, the sound of a siren grew louder in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed through the living room window, painting the walls in strobing colors. Mark's head snapped towards the window, his eyes wide with pure terror. The game was over. He had lost. And I had won. The arrival of the police was swift and efficient. 2 officers, a man and a woman, came to the door. I let them in. They were calm and professional. I had already spoken at length with the detective earlier that day, so they knew exactly what to expect. Mark didn't even try to run. The fight had gone out of him completely. He just stood in the middle of the living room, a hollowed-out shell of the arrogant man he had been just minutes before. "Mark Johnson?" The male officer asked, his voice firm. Mark just nodded, unable to speak. "You're under arrest for invasion of privacy and attempted theft." The officer recited his rights as he put him in handcuffs. Mark didn't resist. He didn't say a word. He just stared at the floor, his face a mess of shame and defeat. My mom watched the whole thing from the couch, her arms wrapped around herself, silent tears streaming down her face. She didn't look at him once. It was as if he had already ceased to exist for her. As they led him out of the house, Mark finally looked at me. His eyes were pleading, desperate. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. I just stared back at him, my expression cold and unyielding. I wanted him to see that I felt no pity for him. I felt nothing but a vast, empty satisfaction. He had built a prison of surveillance for me, and in the end, he was the one who ended up in chains. They put him in the back of the police car, and I watched as it drove away, its flashing lights disappearing down the street, taking the darkest chapter of my life with it. When the car was gone, a profound silence fell over the house. It was just me and my mom, sitting in the living room that was still littered with the emotional wreckage of the confrontation. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I went and sat on the couch next to her, not touching her, just being there. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry, Chloe," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "I am so sorry." "It's not your fault," I said softly, even though a part of me felt that it was. But seeing her so broken, so utterly devastated, I couldn't bring myself to be angry with her. "You didn't know." "But I should have," she cried, her voice rising with guilt. "I should have listened to you. All those times you told me he made you uncomfortable, all those times I brushed it off. I told you to be grateful. I defended him. I enabled him. I chose him over my own daughter." Her words were a confession, a painful acknowledgement of her own blindness. "I loved him," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Or I thought I did. He made me feel safe. And I wanted that so badly that I refused to see what was right in front of me. I refused to see what he was doing to you." She started to sob, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her whole body. This time I did put my arm around her. She leaned into me, and we just sat there for a while as she cried it all out. She cried for her broken heart, for her shattered trust, and for the years she had spent defending a monster. In the days that followed, the house felt strangely quiet and empty. The absence of Mark's heavy presence was a relief so profound, it felt like I could breathe properly for the first time in years. My mom moved as if in a daze, but there was a new determination in her eyes. She called a lawyer the very next day and filed for divorce. She was resolute. There was no hesitation, no second guessing. The man she had married was gone, replaced by the stranger she had seen on the television screen. I had to give a formal statement to the police, and I handed over all my evidence. The SD card from the smoke detector, the audio recorder, and the video file from my hidden phone. The detective I spoke with, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, assured me the case was as solid as they come. "You did an incredibly brave thing, Chloe," she told me, "and a very smart thing. It's not easy to turn the tables on someone like that." A week later, Sarah came over. We were in my room, and for the first time, it felt completely and totally mine. I had taken down the compromised smoke detector and the digital clock. They were in an evidence bag now. The room felt bigger, brighter. "So," Sarah said, plopping down on my bed, "how does it feel to be a certified genius and a hero?" I laughed, a real, genuine laugh. "It feels quiet," I said. "It feels safe." "You got him," she said, her voice soft. "You really did it. You took all the power back." I looked around my room, at my books, my posters, my life. "Yeah," I said. "I did." My mom gave me some money, an advance on what she would get from selling the house. She insisted I get my own place, that I not spend another minute in a house with so many bad memories. "Go start your life, honey," she had said, her eyes full of a sad, fierce love. "You deserve to be free." So Sarah and I found a small 2-bedroom apartment near campus. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The day we moved in, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room, our voices echoing in the space. It felt like a new beginning. I was finally free. The legal process dragged on, but with the mountain of evidence against him, Mark had no choice but to take a plea deal. He was sentenced to several years in prison. He lost everything: his job, his home, his wife, his freedom. He was disgraced, his reputation destroyed. My mom sold the house and moved to a smaller place across town. Our relationship was healing, slowly. The trust had been broken, not just by Mark, but by her denial. But we were talking, really talking, for the first time in a long time. She was learning to see me as an adult, and I was learning to forgive her for not being the protector I had needed. One afternoon, I was unpacking the last box of my things in my new room. I pulled out a brand new smoke detector I had bought at the hardware store. It was a simple, basic model. No frills, no hidden features. I got a stepladder and climbed up to install it on the ceiling. As I twisted it into place, I thought about Mark. I thought about how he had used something meant for safety as a tool for violation. He had tried to make me a prisoner in my own room, to make me feel small and powerless. But he had underestimated me. He had thought his control was absolute. He never imagined that the person he was watching was also watching him, learning his weaknesses and plotting his downfall. He finally learned what it feels like to have your private world exposed for everyone to see. And as I stepped down from the ladder and looked at my new, safe, and truly private room, I smiled. I would be installing this one myself.